Hey everybody, welcome to Pop Culture Philosophers. I'm Rockin' Robbie Billups, and it's time for the weekly comic book review. That's right everybody, thanks for checking out the video. I am Rockin' Robbie Billups. This is the weekly comic book review. It's the show where I read a lot of comic books, and I'll let you know what I thought about them, and we always start with the pick of the week. This week's pick of the week: The Many Deaths of Laila Starr, #1, from Boom Studios. Now, this is written by Ram V, and it's got artwork by Felipe Andrade. I loved this book. Boom Studios did a great job of putting this one together, assembling the talent. I got this super cool David Mack foil cover. There's also a regular cover. What is the premise of this book, though? It's about death getting fired. So this book focuses in on the Hindu pantheon, the Hindu mythology, and the goddess of death basically gets laid off. She gets brought up into heaven's office one day, and they're like, you know what? This child that was prophesied to come that was going to end death, well, he just arrived, so sorry, but, you know, them's the breaks. We're gonna, you know, you're done. And so they send her to Earth in a mortal body. And when death goes to Earth, let's just say that she's not very pleased, and she's trying to seek out this prophesized child and end it and get her job back, right? The book is awesome. The artwork is fan-frickin-tastic. It's beautiful. It's innovative. It's doing something different. The lettering is top-notch. Everything about this book works. It's because Ram V is able to craft a charming and still kind of funny story. This is rather a little bit tongue-in-cheek, a little fun, a little charming, more so than I'm used to from Ram V's work, but it really, really works. Doesn't feel like he's working outside of his wheelhouse. Feels like this is exactly the story it needs to be told. It's based in mythology. It's based in the idea of humanity. What does it mean to be human? And what does it mean for the god of death to have to become human? And I really liked it. I thought it had a nice, fun, charming touch to it. Great artwork, magnificent coloring, and fantastic leathering. The Many Deaths of Laila Starr, #1 from Boom Studios. The pick of the week by far. Also from Boom, we have Power Rangers #6. Power Rangers, Mighty Morphin, they've both been fantastic, doing great sci-fi, space, superheroic type stuff. Power Rangers is the more sci-fi, space-oriented one, and I'm having so much fun with this book. It's about the Power Rangers actually having to make tough decisions, do things that they may not consider to be the good guy thing to do, but for the greater good. So it's definitely a more nuanced and more complex take on the heroic nature of the Power Rangers and their mythology. Ryan Parrott and company have been doing a great job. The artwork is great, bright, buoyant colors, fantastically, kinetically charged, energetic panels. Really good stuff. And this one is talking a little bit more about some extra Power Rangers lore and bringing it all together. And that's what Ryan Parrott's been doing such a great job on with this book. Power Rangers #6 out this week from Marvel. We've got Way of X #1, $4.99 extra size debut issue of the new Nightcrawler book. And that's what this is. This is the Nightcrawler book. It could easily be solicited or be pitched as, you know, we knew that Nightcrawler was trying to formulate the mutant religion, and that this is what that is. Well, it's not really quite about that. Now, writer Simon Spurrier actually said this in an article, in an interview. He said, it's not really about Nightcrawler forming a mutant religion, and you find out why in this first issue. Because of all the crazy things like the Crucible, because of the resurrection protocols and all kinds of things, it's really led Nightcrawler to be questioning not his faith per se, but just faith in general. What is the difference between a mutant soul post-resurrection compared to pre-resurrection? What does it mean to an X-Man to have faith in a god or gods or anything like that? These are questions that Nightcrawler's delving into in this issue. It is a little bit long. It does kind of feel a little bogged down. I would have liked to have had more of a punchy, in-your-face first issue that really set everything up nice and clear, but it didn't quite do that. It kind of meandered around a little bit, went through some muddy waters. It took a while to get to its point. Once it got to its point, I was excited about it because it's not just a character-driven story about Nightcrawler questioning his faith, questioning the idea of mutant protocols and resurrections and all that kind of stuff, but it's also like leaning pretty heavily into some of the other things that Hickman has been building up in the X-Men verse since. So it was pretty solid, not as solid as I would have wanted it to be. Like I said, because of its oversized nature, it kind of felt a little bogged down by the weight of some of the dialogue or something like that, but it was still interesting and it's still pretty cool, and one of the more refreshing X-Men #1s we've had in a good long while. Well, I guess since, like, Hellions #1. The Mighty Valkyries #1 is here. This is a mini-series, once again focusing on Jane Foster's Valkyrie and the new Valkyries. So, they've introduced, I guess, the version of the character from Thor Ragnarok in a way, something like that. So, the main story in here, though, is about Jane Foster's Valkyrie. It's got artwork. Well, first of all, it's written by Jason Aaron, but, yo, the artwork by Matea de Ailuis, fan-frickin-tastic. The artwork in this book was amazing. Now, Jason Aaron also has a co-writer, but, you know, I wasn't really looking forward to reading this book, but I actually really, really liked it. Loved the artwork, loved the story. I was really engaged with it. It kept me entertained and compelled, and most of these Valkyrie books haven't really been doing that, so I thought that this was pretty neat. Now, there is a backup story here that's the, I guess, like the Tessa Thompson version of the character, and it was okay. It just didn't really do much for me, but the main story on this one I thought was pretty freaking solid. Really anchored by that great artwork, but some decent stuff being done with the character of Jane Foster. We got a one-shot Women of Marvel #1. This is a bunch of short stories featuring some of Marvel's best women characters and done by some of their women talent, right? So pretty much everything's done by a female writer or a female artist and involving a female character. They're all kind of cool, they're cute, they all got their charm to them, but nothing really exceptional kind of throws out. But I do like the Sophie Campbell story in here because I'm a big fan of her work. Women of Marvel #1, though, if this is something you're into, you want to celebrate the legacy of the Women of Marvel, both on the page and behind the page, definitely for you. And pretty cool covers throughout that whole thing, too. Carnage, Black, White, and Blood, issue #2. So this is an anthology about Carnage. They're all going to have short stories with Carnage. Now, the first issue last month, I really did not like it. I didn't like any of the short stories. This one, though, I loved every single one of these short stories, mostly because the first one is done by Donny Cates and Kyle Hotz, and it's got a really great, creepy artwork attached to it, and it's actually doing some interesting things with the concept and character of Cletus Cassidy / Carnage post King in Black. So that was pretty nifty and rather cool. Then the next story is by Chip Zdarsky and Marco Cicchetto. Well, they are the team behind Marvel's best title right now, which is Daredevil, so it goes to show that, of course, I was really going to be into their Carnage story, and I definitely was. Then the last story is done by Ram V. Holy cow, you know me, you know I'm going to be excited for that one. Javier Fernandez is the artist on that. I'm just going to show you a little bit of that. That's from the Donny Cates Kyle Hotz story. I loved all three of these stories. They were super strong, but they were all completely different, and I really, really like that and applaud that. It's one of my favorite things about anthologies. They've definitely come back with a fury here lately, and Carnage, Black, White, and Blood #2 was pretty solid. So if you were let down by issue #1, 2's the one you've been waiting for. That was solid. Now we'll see what happens in the next 2. X-Force is here with issue #19. You know, I really like X-Force. X-Force is one of my favorite X-books. I think Benjamin Percy's been doing a really fantastic job with this title, and we're now centered in on this Quentin Quire-esque story, and I've really been enjoying it. But this one just didn't do much for me. It felt rather confused, a little disappointing, and the artwork was very weak to me in this one. I was not digging the artwork. Now, I know that there are bits in here because we're dealing with the astral plane, we're dealing with all kinds of mental projections, and there's some leeway in artwork like that. But this one, it just didn't do anything for me. It didn't help the confusion I had throughout the story. It felt kind of a little duddy. Like, I just didn't really like this one that much. And X-Force has been one I've really been enjoying. So either A, the book is definitely falling in quality, or B, I need to sit down and reread all 19 of these issues and get caught up and then see what happens. Because right now, it's lost me. And that happened rather quick because I was really enjoying the story. But this one, I found rather confusing and quite dull. Amazing Spider-Man 64 here, though. I really like this issue of Amazing Spider-Man. There you go. It just goes to show you, once we get past this Kindred shit, like, I'm actually more engaged, more compelled by what's going on with Pete, with his friends, with the Daily Bugle, with Randy Johnson or Randy Robertson, and Randy Johnson, right? You remember when he killed that bird? Amazing Spider-Man 64 is awesome, focusing back on the Boomerang story, back on the Peter Parker life aspect. That's what Nick Spencer does well, and he's doing it well here. There's still a little bit of kindredness going on. Obviously, we haven't, dealt with all that. And there's an ending in here that sets up what's the big thing that Spencer's building up to, I guess, this summer. And it doesn't seem very exciting. But I will tell you this. All the issues that involve around Pete and his living situation and Boomerang, I like them. Artwork's different in here. It's okay. Vincentini, the artwork was all right. It had a nice energy to it. But Amazing Spider-Man 64, that's been like several issues in a row that I've enjoyed of Amazing Spider-Man, but I'm not going to be fooled because my spider sense is going off, and I sense some not so great issues in the future. Because remember, we're still not done with this Kindred stuff. It's still just building and building and building and building and building. So there you go. Avengers is out with a new issue, issue 45. It says it's a King in Black tie-in. Don't believe that for a second. It's a bullshit tie-in. There's no King in Black tie-in here. It's dealing with the after effects of King in Black. Like, it's about the Avengers, like, the next day after, basically, like, how they're picking up the pieces. You remember that scene in King in Black number 5 where Blade kind of turned on all the vampires he was helping? It deals with that. And this is mostly set up for what I think is going to be something that's really going to be focused on Marvel soon, and that's the... I don't want to spoil it, but it involves the vampires and Dracula and a new status quo for Blade and for the Marvel Universe vampires, and I found it to be rather appealing. Now that all that Phoenix stuff is out of the way, just dealing with this book, dealing back with that vampire threat, dealing with Blade and his place in the Avengers, I actually really liked it. Thought it was solid, setting some interesting stuff up. But don't be fooled because my Avengers sense is going off and Heroes Reborn is right around the corner. And I don't think that's going to be very good. Alien number 2 is here. Really liked the first issue. Immediately started reading this one. Didn't really dig on it. Felt like the artwork was a bit more sloppy and a bit more rushed. But the story hooked me. A few pages in, it just hooked me. This feels like an Alien story, like a real fun one. I'm invested in the characters. I'm invested in the setting. I'm invested in the concept. You get the whole gist of the story, what the mission is going to be about, how it's going on. All that setup from issue 1 has paid off now in issue number 2, and it had a really great, horrifying ending. I really liked it. Alien number 2, 2 issues in. Marvel's done a solid job with Alien, mostly because of the writing and the meticulous nature of building up the pace by writer Philip Kennedy Johnson. So kudos. So far, 2 issues in, and I'm really liking that Alien book. Let's jump over to DC. Batman Fortnite Zeropoint. This book is on fire. I'm surprised it's not burning my hands right now. It's already selling on eBay for like 25, 30 bucks. Why? Because there's a code in here, like a digital code to get a Harley Quinn skin for your Fortnite character. Whatever. I'm here to talk about it as a comic book. As a comic book, this is weak. It's weak. It's okay. Christos Gage does a decent job. He knows what he's doing. You know what I'm saying? It's a Fortnite Batman tie-in, whatever. The story doesn't, there's nothing there. I mean, it's okay. It's interesting, but the big draw of this is, I guess, getting that code to have that Harley Quinn skin in Fortnite. So if that's worth paying extra to you, by all means. But if you're a comic book aficionado and you love great storytelling in the medium of comic books, this is not for you. Basically, Batman just shows up in this world. He's confused. He doesn't remember who he is. All these people he doesn't know show up. They start fighting. And that's pretty much the issue. It doesn't really do anything. It's probably not even designed to really do anything, but just kind of mesh the brands together and cause some hype. And it has caused some hype. But I will tell you this. If you're like one of those Batman guys that feels like you got to get every single thing and you love reading Batman stories, I mean, I would just skip this one. Don't overpay for this. But if you're a Fortnite person, you gotta have the Harley Quinn skin. Well, there you go. The Flash is here with issue 769. I really liked 768. That was the first issue of the new direction from the new team. Wally West is now the Flash, but he decides his first day that, you know what, I don't want to do this, I want to quit. That seems kind of silly, just knocking stuff off the desks, no problem. Flash 69 kind of takes a really interesting concept, and then it's all right. I mean, it's okay. Basically, what's happening is that Wally West quits, but then he kind of gets like pulled out of his body and thrown into the Speed Force. And then in the last issue, he was running around as a caveman. Then he gets flung into the future, and he's in the body of Bart Allen. Most of this issue is that has a decent setup. So we're dealing with the Flash legacy, past, present, and future, and all that stuff, plus the mystery of their powers. But this one just didn't quite have the weight or the energy that the first one did. Now, the first one was extra size. It was like 38 story pages for $4.99. This is a normal sized issue for $3.99, and the art's pretty decent and it's okay, but it just doesn't quite capture the compelling energy of the previous issue. So Flash 769 I thought was just all right, and it's going to be a while, I think, until we get that next big solid Flash run, because it seems like they only happen like once every decade. You know, we had the Wade run, then we had the Johns run, and now we had the Williamson run, and then it's just, it may be a while till we get the next one. Catwoman number 30 is here, a fantastic issue written by Ron V, who's got a lot of great work out this week. Catwoman number 30, though, does a great job of having, you know, Ron V's been doing this whole thing where he's like putting his own spin on these different heists, and he's making these Catwoman books that have a little bit of emotional weight to them, but the books themselves are kind of free and a little bit loose, and they're playing with this nice vibe. In this one, it starts getting a little bit more deep, a little bit more resonating, a little bit more into the character of Selina, and some more refined and tragic elements, and I'm really, really digging it. Federico Blanco, is it Federico or is it Fernando? Fernando Blanco and Jordi Belair. The artwork is great. Some really cool stuff done with the composition, with the storytelling. And this new villain that Rom has created is freaking fantastic. There's some really great moments in here that are really showing the motion and action of the characters very efficiently and very even at times experimentally and innovatively on the comic book page. Catwoman number 30 did not disappoint. Loved it. Nightwing 79. I'm just throwing comics everywhere. Nightwing 79. This may be the best DC book I read all week. Tom Taylor, Bruno Redondo did an amazing run on Suicide Squad that just wrapped up. Now they're on Nightwing, and oh yes, please, please. Tom Taylor's second issue of Nightwing was filled with so much character development. So many laugh-out-loud moments, some really great storytelling, amazing artwork, some great action, some nice adventures, some really great moments between characters. Tom Taylor understands the character of Dick Grayson perfectly. Redondo knows how to make a comic book feel different, feel unique, and still such a gratifying experience. The artwork is great, the coloring is great. Everything about this book was so freaking top-notch, and it, like I said, had laugh-out-loud moments. It's really working and stretching out the character of Dick Grayson, and I'm just loving it. I'm having so much fun with this book. Great moments between certain characters, like I said. Tom Taylor and Redondo are at the beginning of what could be a classic run of Nightwing. In the last issue, they got a lot of comparisons to Matt Fraction's Hawkeye. In this one, I would see those comparisons continuing on, but starting to diverge a little bit from the style that was so obviously planted by Fraction and Aja, whatever. But Nightwing number 79, primo, dudes. I really liked it. Justice League number 60 is here. 20 pages by Bendis, the main storyline, and it's interesting. He's got some interesting concepts that he's trying to do here, mostly involving Black Adam joining the Justice League. You know, Black Adam, Superman sees him, and he's like, you know, Black Adam's always trying to do the right thing. Maybe we should, like, you know, reach out to him. And so he's suggesting that they bring in Black Adam in the midst of this Naomi stuff. So you're following the mystery of Naomi, and you're waiting impatiently for Season 2 to start. This is the next best thing right now, because Bendis is adding some new elements to her mystery, to her origins in these pages. And he is doing some interesting things with Black Adam, how his dynamic's going to change the team, and the introduction of Hippolyta to the team, and the beef that she has with Black Adam. So all that stuff is cool. But in 20 pages, once again, the villain's not very memorable. It just seems like another Rogol Zar kind of guy, like just another big monster for Bendis to create that will be worthless and meaningless in a few months. That's just what it seems like, but we shall see. Then there's the 10-page backup story of Justice League Dark by Rom V. I think Rom V wins the week, everybody. Amazing. So much great stuff is done in just 10 simple pages. So I will say this. Justice League number 60 is a really good experiment. It's a really good a bit of research. It's a it's a treat because you get to see what Bendis does in 20 pages and then get to see what someone like Ram V can do in 10 pages. And I'm just going to tell you this. Ram V does more with the characters, with the story, with the narrative, with the pacing. Ram V does so much more in 10 pages than Bendis does in 20. And that's just mind-boggling to see in a 30-page comic. Justice League number 60, pretty decent. Pretty decent. But that Justice League Dark story by Ron V, pretty dope. Superman Red and Blue issue number 2. I really love the first issue of this anthology series. Much like Carnage Red, White, and Black, this is Superman Red and Blue, and all of the stories are, of course, illustrated in red and blue. The art's pretty solid. It's got some nice artwork in here from Duncan Rouleau. We've got, who else? We got Dennis Cowan. We got Dan Panosian, Marley Zarconi, and Jason Howard. Jason Howard's artwork, his story, I really freaking like the artwork. And it's a nice throwback to some like Return, Death of Superman type stuff. So it's got some cool artwork, and it's really cool to see this Val Zod story from Earth to Superman. And the Dennis Cowan's, or the Dan Panosian work's really cool. But none of these stories really stuck out as being something significant, as being something different, as being something must read. In the first issue, the Danny and Dan Waters story alone was worth the price of admission, but I can't justify buying this one for any of these stories in here. They're all right, they're okay, but I would recommend this just for the most hardcore of Superman fans. Then we have Truth and Justice issue number 3. Danny Lore's doing the job here. I'm very excited to see Danny on a Hellblazer Constantine book. I know that they're a huge fan. However, Truth and Justice has been just kind of insignificant. It's one of those books that when we read it, we know it's insignificant. It's bogged down by the weight of what the book is supposed to be. It's supposed to be kind of reflecting like social issues through the eyes and lenses of DC characters. And this one's all right, and it's nice to see Papa Midnight, and it's really nice to see Danny Lore do a Constantine story, but I'd like to see something with a little bit more meat, with a little bit more punch, with a little bit more significance for Danny in the DC universe. Truth and Justice number 3 was okay. Better than issue 1, but not quite as good as issue number 2. Let's jump over to Image. And from Image, we have Haha number 4. This is the 4th issue out of 6. Each issue a completely different story, one and done, anthology, surreal, cerebral, out there, weird about clowns, right? I've been enjoying the hell out of this series. Each issue has a different artist. In this issue, we have artwork by Patrick Horvath. And I really liked it. So the artwork is really cool. It's got this nice like watercolor aspect to it. Some pretty solid line work, and the artwork totally captures the mystifying, unsettling nature of this story. Basically, this is about a drunk party clown that disappears from a kid's birthday party. And the mom's like, yo, where'd the clown go? And the kid's like, oh, he shrunk down and got inside of the balloon, and they all float, right? So it's touching on that whole idea of we all float here and things like that. W. Maxwell Prince is such an expert at making these stories that feel thin, but at the same time are just packed full of meaning. Or maybe I'm just wanting them to be packed full of meaning. The way that we kind of look at symbols and objects and items and people in our own lives is, purposeful, meaningful, significant, and then maybe they're actually not. So it's a nice exploration on that, but it's also just a nice exploration, I think, on readers like me who are trying to pick everything they can about what is so significant about this, what makes it work. So it works on so many different levels. It's just a nice, entertaining, weird story. It goes deep, or it also kind of criticizes those who try to go too deep into the insignificant things of everyday life, the mundane, right? But finding significance in the mundane is something that is so essential to the human process, in my opinion, and it's something that the writer W. Maxwell Prince understands, and that's why he can come at these stories like this. Or I'm just blowing smoke out of my ass, and I have no clue what this book is about, and it's just trying to be silly and meaningless, and it's making me find significance in it. But either way, I think it's rather brilliant. Haha, number 4. Out this week. Also from Image Comics, we have Stray Dogs issue number 3. I was very disappointed in this horror horror homage cover because I had to look it up. It's Annabelle. I've never seen Annabelle. I was like, man, really? Because there's like some kind of store exclusive that's a Poltergeist cover, and I'm like, that's so much more appropriate for this book. Anyway, All Dogs Go to Heaven meets Silence of the Lambs or Seven, some kind of, think of a 90s psychological thriller. That's exactly what it is. It gets a little bit more into the horror route here in issue number 3. I have a lot of fun with this book. A lot of people I know have been completely taken aback by the very cartoony nature of the artwork, but that's so obviously essential. It's meant to be like a Donald Bluth film, but dealing in a world like this. And I think it does an excellent job. I love the artwork. I love the white gutters. I love the pacing. I love the dialogue. I love how these dogs talk like cartoon animals that we know from so many animated films that we've seen. I really like this story. I think it's great, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. Issue number 3 was exceptional. Just wish they would have done a more iconic movie for the homage cover. Now, I'm not talking smack about Annabelle, because J Strick today was stretching on me. He's like, yo, don't be the old guy. Everybody loves that Annabelle franchise. I'm like, okay, maybe I should try it. But a Poltergeist cover? Who's got that Poltergeist cover? Anyway, Ultra Mega number 2 is here. By the way, Stray Dogs number 3 was awesome. Ultra Mega number 2 is here. It's kind of like an excessively violent and more monstrous take on Ultraman. A more dour and dark take on Ultraman, right? And it's exciting enough. The first issue I really liked. It had a lot of big explosive action, a lot of interesting concepts, and it had a nice setup for where the series was going to go. And it's interesting enough. The basic idea is that the Ultraman came and these kaiju whatever, and then like this big battle erupted and everybody got buried in this blood or whatever. So now some of humanity is affected by this kaiju blood or poison or disease or something, right? And then there's people that are going along with it, and then there are people that are like resisting it. And so it's an interesting world. It's a $7.99 book, just like the first issue, because there's a lot of pages to it. But it just doesn't quite have that explosiveness that made the first issue so enamoring to me, so appealing. It kind of lost something for me in the second issue. So it's all right, but it didn't hit me as hard as that first issue. So Ultra Mega number 2, I think, was a step down in quality, but still pretty decent. Radiant Black number 3 is here. And Kyle Higgins is doing something very interesting with this. He's telling us a very superhero-esque story. It's a superhero origin story. It's about this dude who's a writer, and things haven't been going well for him, so now he has to move back home, and then while he's doing all that, he comes across this like weird like black hole-looking thing, and he gets the powers. He becomes a superhero. But this story doesn't seem to be presented about that, which I think is fascinating. It's actually about this dude and the fact that he feels like a failure. This whole issue is about struggling through writer's block. Which I thought was rather interesting. And it gives me a very much like a Kaufman-esque vibe, kind of like something from Adaptation, you know, where Charlie Kaufman, I think it was Charlie Kaufman, right? It's Charles Kaufman, was hired to adapt this story, and he was having trouble adapting it, so he made the movie, he wrote his script about him as a writer having trouble adapting this thing that he was supposed to adapt. So it gets kind of meta, I guess, a little bit, like not so much as where the characters know that they're comic book characters, but it's about a writer struggling to figure out what to write. And all he wants to write is, you know, this. So like maybe that's kind of what Higgins is doing. Like he's like, I don't really know what to do with this concept, but I want to tell a story about what it's like being a writer, not knowing what the hell to write, and the self-defeating nature of certain writers, and being obsessed with the idea that you're nothing. And I think Kyle Higgins is a great writer. The art by Marcelo Costa is amazing. So Radiant Black number 3 was interesting. It's going to be way different, I think, this book, than what most people are expecting. If you want something like Invincible, if you want more typical superhero fare, but on a mature level, I don't think we're going to get that from Radiant Black. I think we're going to get a story about a writer trying to struggle with what he wants to write. And I think that's rather brilliant. So 3 issues in, and I think Radiant Black's better than ever. Radiant number 3 was pretty freaking awesome. From Aftershock Comics, we have The Girls of Dimension 13, number 1. Let me tell you, you sold me on the name. The Girls from Dimension 13. I'm like, all right, I'm ready for this. This is going to be weird. It's going to be mind-boggling. I hope it's a little bit psychedelic. It was none of those things. This book was dull. It was boring. It was obvious. It was poorly executed. The dialogue was a mixed match of just juvenile. I just did not like this book. It was just so predictable, so easy to understand. Nothing about it was engaging to me. I breezed my way through this issue, and at the end of it, I was like, well, that was it. A fantastic title, but pretty much a weak book. That's the way I felt about it from Aftershock. Girls of Dimension 13, #1, so cool title, but don't be fooled. Knock 'em Dead, #5, though, was amazing. This is the final issue of the Aftershock miniseries, written by Elliot Rahal, with artwork by Mattia Monaco. Really like this. So it's kind of the whole premise of this story is about a stand-up comedian who's not very good, who winds up making some kind of weird deal or something, or developing this weird, interesting power where he can absorb the soul of a dead comedian, right? And he uses these abilities to soar, to become very famous. Here's the final issue, and what happens is Elliot takes this story in a direction that I did not see coming. I loved this ending. I thought it was rather profound, very impactful, and incredibly intelligent. Knock 'em Dead #5 was a nice observation on the cost of the rise to success, how that can affect your relationships, and this whole book has been about a relationship between a brother and a sister, and it comes to such a head here in issue #5. When I first started reading this book, I was like, well, I feel like I missed a few issues, but it was so purposefully structured this way, and I thought so elegantly done. I really feel like Elliot and Mattia and company knocked this one out of the park. Knocked them dead. Get it? Anyway, issue #5, this is the final issue. Definitely worth it. I feel like each issue of this series got better and better and better. When we had Elliot on the show, we were 4 issues in, and I said, how are you making a comic book that's better each issue? Because that's usually not how it goes. And he said, oh, that's a great compliment. No, Elliot, I mean that. Like, issue 5 was the best of this series yet. Hit so many notes, so hard, and so right on the nose, but so subtly. Perfect. Oh my goodness. Knock 'em Dead #5. Knocked me dead. Blew me away. Loved it. Godzilla, Monster and Protectors. #1 is here from IDW. So it's been a while since we've had a Godzilla book from IDW. Kong vs. Godzilla's released to some success, so why not? Well, why not? Because this one was kind of dull. It's all right. I mean, it's okay for a juvenile-oriented Godzilla story. This feels like more of an adaptation, a modern reboot or relaunch of the Godzilla animated series from back in the day. And honestly, I'm not even kidding. Read this book, get to the end of it. I swear to God, we're getting Godzuki. Now, I will applaud this book if we get Godzuki. In fact, if I flip through issue #2 and Godzuki is in there, I will read it and I will sing its praises, hopefully. But the first issue, not very interesting to me. The most interesting thing to me about Godzilla is the destruction that Godzilla causes, is the reflection that Godzilla is of humanity's destructive, self-destructive nature. You're missing that in here because it's about this kid, and I guess it's cool and it's supposed to appeal to kids. I'm not a kid, so it didn't work for me. I think most Godzilla fans are going to pick this up and be like, yo, what is this? Not what we need, not what we deserve, and not even something to sink our teeth into. Godzilla, Monsters, and Protectors, kind of weak. Kind of weak, to be honest with you. But a book that is not weak is Resonant. Resonant is here with issue #9. I believe this is the penultimate issue. So we're nearing the end of this adaptation of the Odyssey into a really interesting original concept. David Andre, friend of the show, does such an amazing job with this book. It's about humanity. It's a post-apocalyptic book. It's kind of a little bit like survival horror in a way. And it is straight up kind of like an adaptation of the Odyssey in a different situation. And I love it. And you really start feeling it in this issue. Basically what has happened is this dad who has his kids, and they live in this post-apocalyptic world where these waves are happening. And when these waves hit, all of your desires, any random thought, like if you got a random thought like, oh, I got an itch on my arm, it scratches so much, I just wish I could just tear the flesh off my arm. Well, in the middle of a wave, that's what will actually happen. Now, early in the series, the dad went off to find supplies for his children. Now his children are left to fend for themselves against all this craziness at home. Meanwhile, he's out in his own Odyssey-esque adventure, and there's a dog in it, and the dog is the highlight and the star of the show. Skylar Patridge was the new artist from the second arc, a different art from the first one. Really, she has come into her own in this book. This is the best work she has done on this yet. It's really a shame that this book is ending at 10 issues, because this could be like a wasted space and go for 25. There is so much story to tell. It could have been paced out a little bit more. And with Skylar coming in to do the artwork, like, I'm right on board with that, because you also got Jason Wordy and you got Darren Bennett continuing to do what they did from day one on the comic book series, making an audible, visceral experience. Resonant number 9. Super solid. Come on now. Also from Vault, we have I Walk with Monsters, issue number 5. This is the penultimate issue of this one by Paul Cornell. It's all right. Okay, so Sally Cantrino, the artwork, I really like the artwork. The story's weird to me. This is definitely something that I'm going to have to sit down and read it all again in preparation for the final issue, because I feel like the pace is off. There's something weird about this book. It's an interesting enough concept. It's about this woman who was abused as a child by a political figure. And now she has since come into a friendship, if you will, with the dude who becomes a monster. So they work out this deal. They're going to go hunt these like sexual predators, these children predators, right? Child predators. And they're going to like take care of business, right? She sets him up, he knocks him down. But there's a lot more nuance to it. And they're revealing the backstory through a series of backflashes. But it's starting to feel a little bit too jumbled for me by issue number 5. I read this issue, it felt brief, it felt quick, and then when you realize that this is setting up the big grand finale, kind of threw me off a little bit. So maybe I need to sit down and reread it, because I was liking the series, but now it just feels like it's kind of rushing to its conclusion. I Walk with Monsters number 5, though, still pretty solid. Jonah, or is it Jonah? Jonah and the Unpossible Monsters, issue number 2. Chris Samney doing this book. I don't know if it's his wife or his kid, Laura Samney. Someone let me know. Colored by Matt Wilson. Really good. Mostly it's a silent issue, mostly for the most part, but it's about this kid who's gone off and become a wild child, kind of like a Tarzan, Commandy-esque character. Meanwhile, her sister is trying to find her. And so it's got some really nice touching moments. It's a great exploration and how to tell a story with very few words. And it's good and it's awesome. I think it's really nice and appropriate for all ages. Really great, masterful work at how to tell a story using a lot of action and using a lot of emotion without a lot of words. Jonah and the Impossible Monsters number 2, pretty solid. From Dark Horse Comics, we have Koja Karu, the Skinner. I read this issue. It's the first part of a 2-issue series set in the Magnolaverse. It says Tales from the Outerverse. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but it was all right. I felt lost. I felt so lost. I didn't understand what was going on. Usually anything related to the Magnolia universe, I really get excited for, and I was excited to read this one, but I felt lost, I felt confused, and it didn't really do much for me. And it didn't feel so as connected to the Hellboy universe as it did Lady Baltimore. So let's talk about Lady Baltimore. The Witch Queens, issue number 2. A continuing of the Baltimore saga, originally Lord Baltimore, now this is about his wife, Lady Baltimore, continuing his mission. And we're dealing with the witches, we're dealing with the witches kind of like making this pact with the Nazis and other kind of things. It felt, once again, I felt confused. This is just the 2nd issue, but I felt like I wasn't anchored into the story, into the characters. Now maybe that's because as Baltimore progressed, I didn't fall out of it, but I definitely wasn't like as into it towards the end. So maybe if I sat down and reread all my Baltimore comics, which that would be an undertaking just to get them all together, but I do want to do that. But Lady Baltimore, The Witch Queens number 2, it was all right. The artwork was decent, but both of these, the most hardcore Magnolia fans out there may even find it difficult to get into these ones. And I am that most hardcore Magnolia fan. But Lady Baltimore still was cool because it was a continuation of that story. But this Koja Karu, the Skinner, I'm lost as hell. I'm lost as hell. Then we have Man's World, issue number 4. This is the final issue from AWA Upshot. I like the series. I thought it was all right. I thought each issue progressively got worse. Not as far as quality, but as far as just what the characters were going through. And it has a really messed up ending here with issue number 4. But it kind of loses its balls at the end, too. Because there's this, like, false ending here. That would have been great. That would have been the ending. That's how you give it punch. But then they kind of just immediately undo it and unravel it. And then kind of, that's kind of weak. Man's World, though, was pretty decent. It's about a group of guys. And they're in a world where to go on vacation, you go to another planet now. And they go off reservation. They go off the safari tour and they wind up just getting more than they bargained for, with lots of death and destruction. The ending, like I said, could have had a lot more punch if they wouldn't have kind of undid what they were setting up. But anyway, Man's World number 4 was still pretty decent. So that's what I read this week. That's what I thought about it. Marvel had some decent books. DC had some decent books. But overall, it was Rom V's week. Anything with Rom V's name is going to be one of the best stories you read. The Mini Death of Laila Starr was by far the pick of the week. His Catwoman was great. His Justice League Dark backup was so much better than the 20 pages that came before it. And, of course, his little short story in Carnage, Red, White, and Blood. Wait, Red, White, and Blood? Black, White, and Blood. Anyway, Rom V wins the week. Boom Studios won the pick of the week with the Mini Death of Laila Starr. What are you reading? What are you digging? Let us know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for checking out the video. Please do like, share, subscribe, and join us over at popculturephilosophers.com for podcasts, blogs, and a whole lot more. I've been Rockin' Robbie Billups. Thanks for rocking with us. Station. Keep on reading.